Hello, welcome to our Women Together Connect session. It's so wonderful to be together, whether you're on Zoom or YouTube. It's an absolute joy. My name is Antoinette, and I am one of the hosts of our Women Together experience with a wonderful little team here, and just an absolute joy. Really, what we do with Women Together is just come together every week and really just maintain a connection to each other and build a sense of resilience, a sense of the practices that we need to show up in everyday life. And I was just thinking just not too long ago, maybe half an hour ago, with some colleagues about why this work is important. And I was thinking about, why do we do Women Together? Why do we access this type of way of being in the world? What is important about that? So I'll dive into a little bit of what I've been thinking about. I'm curious what you all are thinking about. Before I get to any of that, I'd love to just see where we're all coming in from. So if you can type into the chat a little hello and where you're coming from, that's a great way to get us started. And if you're on YouTube, you can just type into the comments. It's always great to just connect to where we are in the world. And, in the United States, we have seen significant effects of weather changes over the last few days and weeks, and definitely holding those in Florida who were affected by Hurricane Ian in our hearts. And we know that there's another hurricane that just hit Mexico. So, there's a lot going on in our world. Our Mother Earth is coming up from all angles. So we're just holding all of our places. So I see today Green Bay, chilly New York, Stamford, Connecticut, New York City, Sweden, Arlington, Massachusetts, Nyack, New York, Columbus, Ohio, Santa Barbara, Woodcliff Lake, New Jersey, wonderful, Toronto, California, Chicago, Vermont, wonderful. So yes, I see a little Happy New Year to all of our Jewish friends. For those of you who were celebrating the New Year this last week, a Happy New Year. And let's see. Palo Alto, California, Southwest Vermont. Francis says, "Are you sure it's Mother Earth or what we're doing to it?" And I think I don't think she's happy with us. Let's put it that way. But we can go into that further. And let's see if I can pull any from the YouTube from our team here. So I'll give it another minute, but let's see. So we're coming in from all over today. That's what's happening. So there's a number of us coming in from all across the United States, definitely a little bit from Europe today. So a warm welcome, a warm welcome. And, as I said, I was thinking a little bit about why we do this. Why is it important? And Francis said, "Are you sure it's Mother Earth?" And I think that's a great question. I think it's important for us to consider what is going on in our world. And when we do that, what we see when we really connect, when we really consider what's going on in our world, we see a lot of disruption. We see a lot of disruption to our social orders, which didn't work for everyone anyway, but we see a lot of disruption to social order. We see a lot of disruption to our environment and our world. I don't know about all of you, but I've been following along what's been going on and watching the images coming out of particularly Fort Myers, Florida, places that, for so many have been safe havens, have been a place where, the weather's beautiful and you can live a good life. And to see those kinds of places be completely destroyed, to see buildings vanish, and to see the way that, for many, many reasons, the oceans are rising up. There's a lot happening, a lot going on that what happens when we experience this kind of disruption? Where do we turn? who do we look to? Who do we look to make sense of this moment, and who do we lean on? And what I find more and more in how I grew up and how I was educated, I learned if I kind of just, if I can do it, if I learn enough and if I get strong enough, I can do it, whatever it is, I can learn how to do it and I can make it happen. And the reality is that we need a lot more resources. We need a lot more resources than just this little I place. And that when we turn to each other, when we really listen to each other, when we really connect with each other, when we're really, really present with each other, we can be those resources for one another. And that circle that we create here, we often hold this larger circle um, in this first opening space on Zoom and in YouTube. And then we move into a smaller circle. We move into breakouts where we can just connect with each other. And often we're connecting with each other on a deeper level because of the practice that we just did. So sometimes we have teachers coming in. Sometimes I act as a little bit of a teacher, bringing in different bits of wisdom for us. And we share with each other from a deeper level when we cultivate our authentic presence and when we connect with one another based on not the kind of, oh, what are you doing today and what happened, give me the gossip, but really connecting more, which is always fun, but also connecting more deeply on a bit more of the essence of who we are as human beings on the planet. So that's a little bit, and just one other little thing. I was listening to a talk the last week or so is the Collective Trauma Summit, which, all of us have experienced varying degrees of some kind of trauma, either in our own lives or our ancestors. And so this is bringing together a number of different teachers, and we just, in listening to some of these people, I was listening to Dan Siegel and a conversation with Dr. Sarah King and Thomas Hubel. And the conversation I thought was fascinating, in part because there was an invitation by Dan Siegel to say, what if we've been learning this kind of linear way of thinking, and what we need is to shift our thinking to complexity. And he was saying, that what we are realizing is that the human mind created these problems. And if that's true, then with a little tweaking, with a little upgrade, our human minds, we can be the ones to actually recreate the world that we know is possible. So I like to imagine that that's a little bit of what we're doing here, that we are cultivating our capacity to be resilient, and also cultivating our capacity to really be the change that's needed in the world, whether that's in our own lives or in our communities or in our own lineage, our families. So I know that many of us have been cultivating a community of practice. If you're brand new, a warm welcome to you as well. That's a little bit of what we do here in this Women Together space. And I think that this ability to see complexity, this ability to kind of have a more long-term whole systems view, so a whole perspective, is something that women are probably pretty good at. We've cultivated over the generations, being able to kind of see and sense the whole. And I think that's, what we have the capacity to do and what we're doing here with each other. So that's my little, no one asked for it, but somebody gave me the opportunity to talk. So that's what's been going through my head, and just thinking about what brings us here for this Women Together space today. Today, we're also focusing on strengthening the muscle of compassion. So we'll do a little practice, we'll turn to each other, we'll share with one another, and then we'll close for the day. So we have a lovely little hour planned. And just for a moment, I'd like to invite you to get sorted with what's coming up for you. What brings you here to this moment, and just connecting with what's coming up for you, and what, perhaps just letting go of anything that came before, perhaps letting go of any reasoning, just being here, being with the breath, being in this body. So taking a moment, you can feel your feet on the ground. You can lower your gaze or close your eyes. And just take a deep breath and relax. And just for a moment, tuning into the breath, just remembering that the breath is always there. Just focusing in on the feet in connection to the earth, feeling perhaps the floor on the inhale, filling the body with air, filling the body with breath, life, oxygen, and feeling that move down into the feet, feeling the feet on the earth, and perhaps sending roots down through the shoes, through the floor, through to the ground. Through to the soil. On the exhale, filling the chamber with air moving out the body and feeling the awareness move to the crown of the head. And connecting to the space just above the crown of the head, the space we call sky. Feeling our capacity as human beings to be both connected to earth, being grounded, feeling connected to the ancestors who walked this earth, and feeling also the ability to be connected to sky, the space of expanse and possibility, lightness, openness. It's a connection to earth and to sky, just staying with the breath moving in and out of the body. And perhaps moving up and down the body, up and down inside the body. When you're ready, tuning into what are you hoping to bring to this space today? Normally we think about what we're trying to get out of something, but what are we hoping to bring to this space today? What do I have to offer to this space today? To this incredible group of women? What do I have to offer? And just connecting with that, holding it, maybe keeping it to yourself. And then tuning your awareness and attention back to the screen and clicking on the, if you're on Zoom, on the top right corner, the view button going into gallery and maybe full screen. And we're just gonna practice awareness with each other, do an awareness practice, but by just practicing awareness. So if you can turn your video on, now's the time. And as we do this, I'd like to invite first for you to just flip through the gallery. So just flipping through and connecting with who's here, depending on how big your screen is, you may have more or less, and knowing that we're also bringing in our YouTube folks and just connecting with these lovely faces. Maybe 3 or 4 boxes. You can just take a little cube and connecting with them with a warm welcome, knowing that they have so much to offer this space, that each of us has something to offer to this world. Just connecting in with these wonderful women and just welcoming them, sending them a warm welcome. Just noticing the moment where you begin to see somebody and you feel yourself being seen by somebody here. And the moment when you start to feel the connectivity, when you start to feel connected, and when you can feel yourself being felt in this space, just notice what's there for you. Perhaps you can see right now, but you can't really feel. Maybe you can feel someone else, but you can't really feel yourself being felt. All is okay. Just sending a warm, warm welcome to this wonderful group and noticing an awareness in your own self of what's coming up for you. Wonderful. And then if you can type into the chat not just what brings you here, but maybe you can share a little bit about what brings you here or what you are hoping to bring today. So what brings you here and what are you hoping to bring today? And you can just type it in the chat and I'll read a few of those out. I saw Barbara already shared her ability to listen, and I think that is such a key in any of the interactions we have in the world is the ability to listen. Are we listening up here? Are we listening just to the story, or are we listening from a deeper place? Curiosity, a listening heart, bringing centeredness and positive energy. Yes, we need that celebration. We need the joy. We need the experience of celebrating what we bring. So, equanimity, I bring joy and love. I'm bringing in possibilities and sisterhood. I love the topic of compassion. Wonderful. Holding relational space. Yes. Oh, so good. Sometimes we need this individual space. We need like I need to take my time. And then there are moments where we really need to be in relation. So the fact that Kathleen is holding relational space for us, that's wonderful. Interested in meeting and talking with other women, sharing concerns and problems and joys. All of the above, Marlene, yes. To hold the silence with respect. Thank you. The opportunity to listen and learn. Wonderful. Listening and validation. Beautiful. So I'll say a couple things about compassion. And then, I will invite us into to really connect with each other because we know that the wisdom is really in this group, in each other. It's definitely not just coming from one source. And there's so many wonderful resources on compassion. So some of my teachers, many of you know Kristen Neff and Arawana Hayashi, who has joined us a number of times. And what I find is that with compassion, I think I've talked a little bit about this before, but just a refresher that, when we look at the world and what's going on, compassion is about connecting to a kind of global suffering. So it's about connecting into not necessarily feeling like I'm better than this person, but a connection of each of us. My suffering knows your suffering. My suffering knows the global suffering. And when we can tune into that kind of connection to a sense of what's really happening in the world, we can feel compassion. And I want to break down a little bit about what the subtle differences are between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Because in order to strengthen our muscle of that, we need to be able to practice all of them. So I sort of see it as a spectrum. I see sympathy on the one hand, I see somebody gets hurt and I'm like, oh, I feel so bad for you. That's harsh. Oh, I'm so sorry you got hurt. But there's a tinge of superiority in that. There's almost like this contempt, oh, that's so sad for you. And at this, there's definitely that's maybe like one very, very far end of the spectrum. There's so many reasons that that comes up. Sometimes it's in our own shame or our own defense mechanisms. But just noticing what happens when I'm feeling sympathy for somebody. And then there's empathy. And empathy, so if I look at the spectrum, then empathy, I feel, is this experience of I can step into your shoes. You are experiencing something, and I can step into your shoes, and for a moment, I can feel what you feel, and I can connect with you from that place. And it's about your feeling. Compassion, in my experience, so compassion, not just in my experience, there's also Dr. Tanya Singer created a really interesting body of research about compassion is actually a muscle in the brain. There's matter in the brain that gets activated when we start practicing compassion on a daily basis or on a regular basis. So she, as far as I can remember, and this was a few years ago, so I'm sure the research has been updated, but what she found is that over a 9-month period of teaching a compassion course and doing a program where people came and they did this practice together, over that time, they did a scan so they could see that the compassion muscle was developing in the brain, and that it grew more and more, and they could see it light up. And what compassion is when we are not disconnected from you out there are experiencing that thing, but we recognize that your struggling is the same, your suffering is the same as my suffering, and that my suffering is the same as this global suffering. And when I can connect, and I use the word suffering specifically, I'm not saying suffering, um, there's a, um, I'm not going to exactly remember who it is that said this, so I'm not going to say it, but I will say that the thought that I'm thinking about is that in a moment we experience pain, right? So something happens and I experience pain. I actually hurt my finger this morning and I experienced pain. And in that moment, that pain lasted for a few seconds. But then after that, anything that I experience after that is a recollection of the pain. So if let's say, I get into a conversation with Marlene, just picking you out of the blue, but let's say I get into a conversation with Marlene and I say something that hurts her feelings, or she says something that hurts my feelings, let's say. And in that moment, I feel a sense of pain. It triggers something. So it triggers something in my body. And we know that we can have a limbic response. Our body can have the same response as what we experience in, physical danger. We can also experience in emotional moments. And so when we have this emotional triggered response, we have it touches on something. And then that thing is done. And all we're doing is staying connected to the memory of that pain. So the idea of that is suffering. And there's so much of that pain, that memory of that pain, that suffering that exists in our world. There's so much that we carry. There's so much that we carry from generations. This suffering is not just like I am currently suffering, like I just hit my hand over and over again. No, that's pain. And that, is something important to be aware of when we're causing it or, alleviate pain. But what I'm talking about is this emotional body of suffering, and it's a global experience. So I'd like to invite us in to connect with that. And I know that, sadness is a gateway in, but I also know that in that moment of compassion, there's also so much heart. There's such a connection to each other. There's a recognition that we're not alone in that practice of compassion. So I'd like to invite us for just a moment to connect in with this practice of compassion, of which there are so many wonderful resources that we can share with you all, with each other. But just for a moment, I'd like to invite us to connect in to a little practice around compassion. So if you can get your feet back on the floor, feeling a sense of connection to the earth and to the sky again, just feeling a sense of being here on the planet. And knowing that as we do this kind of practice, that really what we're doing is connecting to our basic human goodness, that cultivating compassion is just part of being basically good. And that it's always possible. It's always possible to find this connection to compassion. So just for a moment, I'd like to invite you to bring your awareness and attention to the space around the heart. And then as you connect to the space around the heart, knowing that it may not be words, it may just be a feeling, a sensation, a feeling around the heart that you connect to. Perhaps there's some joy. Perhaps also there's a feeling of sadness there. For a moment, just tuning in to the feeling of sadness. If you need something to get you there, you could think about something that makes you sad. Think about the building washing away, people losing their homes. And just for a moment, connecting in with that capacity that the heart has for sadness. Just noticing the quality of that feeling. For me, it feels watery. Just noticing the quality of that feeling. And if there's a desire in you to run away or jump out of it, just recognizing that and staying with whatever's coming up for you. And if you can, tuning into just a connection to sadness, perhaps your own. But perhaps also that of others, the human experience of grief. And inherent in this experience of grief, it's almost as if we can only know this grief because we also know joy. It's just knowing these two go hand in hand. And then connecting into perhaps a friend who may be suffering right now. Connecting in your mind's eye with that person. And just silently saying to yourself, may this person be happy. May this person be healthy. May they be free from suffering. And then perhaps thinking of somebody who's a little more distant from you, who you may not know, maybe you pass on the street sometime, but they were suffering. Perhaps sending to them that same thought. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be free from suffering. And then, if you'd like to challenge yourself a little bit, considering somebody who's even further out, maybe somebody who you actively don't like or you've struggled with in the past, or perhaps a larger figure who you don't like. Just for a moment, sending them, may they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be free from suffering. And then finally, maybe putting a hand on your heart and a hand on the belly, bringing this practice back to the self. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering. And taking a deep breath and thanking yourself for just being with this practice, knowing that may or may not be easy. And what I'd like us to do is we'll turn to each other. So for those of us on YouTube, thank you so much for joining today. We'll see you next week. And for those of us who are here in Zoom, we will turn to each other and we will connect with one another and just share what came up. How did that feel? Perhaps that was really easy, felt real good, jump into sadness and compassion, or perhaps it was, I couldn't even get there. And all of it is okay. So just being with wherever you are and sharing your name, where you're coming from, and what this practice brought up for you. What did this practice bring? Because as we share with each other, that is how we build this muscle of compassion. So we practice it and we share with each other, and this is all part of strengthening this muscle of compassion. So we'll go into the room for about 20 minutes together. Each person should have about 4 or 5 minutes to share name, where you're coming from, and a little bit about the practice. How was it for you? We'll see you back in 20 minutes.